Elizabeth, where are you at the moment?
I'm on the East Coast in America, on the water. I'm not in a place that I usually stay at, so, but I'm very grateful to be here.
Yeah, we are grateful that you're allowing us to do the studio visit. So a huge thank you, Elizabeth. It really means a lot.
I'm grateful to be here and very honored you asked. And it's also just wonderful to talk to you. I'm happy for that.
Yeah, conversations either on the phone or on Zoom became such a precious thing because we are all put to our places. Did you plan on being where you are? Because, or is that more like you ended up?
No, I did actually. Something happened where my boyfriend was taking a job in this place. And so we decided to come in October. And I wasn't so sure how much time I would be here. But then around January, I thought, this is great. We found a place I could have a studio. And it just seemed this time in the world that it might be good to just stay in one place for a while, which I hadn't done in a long time. But I had planned to go to New York and work there also. But then, yeah, it just seemed right to just stay out of harm's way and stay here, which I feel very grateful for. Yeah.
The room you are in, is this your makeshift studio or is?
Yeah, this is my makeshift studio. It's in a little guest house that's on the property.
Oh, nice. That's beautiful. And how were the last like 9 to 10 weeks for you? Could you work or were you more like taking the time to pause and reflect? And how did you feel as an artist? Because as an artist, artists often have their own times, they have their own schedules. They go to the studio. It's up to them when to work, day or night. How did you structure these last 9 to 10 weeks?
Well, in a way, I had already been thinking a lot about how solitary I had been living. You know, actually, I think I've been a little more social because I've made more of an effort to speak to people because everybody's going through this. But before, this was pretty much how I was living, minus the intense grocery experience. And then when this happened, though, you know, and it's so awful how it unfolded in America. And like we said before, I did want to mention what a moment today is for America. It's just so sad. And so I can deal with being alone. I'm very used to it, and I need it for working, and I need it for painting. I often for 3 months at a time and not seeing people. It's not so unusual. But the what was going on thing really did change. I felt constricted. It was like if I was a singer, I had less, or if I was a computer, I had less bandwidth. Somehow I just couldn't, I don't know, I think my mind was trying to deal with the anxiety and just take it all in, you know. And then how unjust it was playing out is like one thing to have this pandemic happening and then another thing what it was revealing. So it was hard to work in a way, even though I kept my usual schedule, and I was just trying to take care of myself a lot so I could keep painting, because I thought that's all I can do, really. So that's what it's been like.
Are you recording or making notes? Do you have notebooks or diaries that you try to record this?
No, for the first time though, since I've been here, there was a certain point in the morning, every morning I was just drawing whatever was next to me. And I'd never really done that. It just seemed like a way of focusing first thing on what the goal was or something. But no, that's a couple times a year I'll write down some things so I don't forget.
You started, we know each other for more than 25 years. And when I first met you, you had just done the show at the Chelsea Hotel. And when I looked at the work, I'm always asking, when I see an artist finding form, and you had found form, I felt very early, I always wonder, when did you decide that you had to be an artist, that you were an artist? And what were the first things you did that you consider art when you look back?
Oh, that's a very good question. I had always been drawing, and actually the way I had people in my life was very much the same through my whole life in some way. That, like when I was a child, I had pictures of ice skaters on the wall that I was drawing, and things like that. It's very natural. I didn't really call it art, you know. I guess, yeah, when I realized I wasn't going to cut it in the graphic design department of SVA when I was 18, I lasted about 2 weeks. I thought I should do something practical and like learn something that I could have a job with, but they said, this isn't going to work out. You better go to the fine arts department. So I kind of already knew that but that's what happened.
The world is very fortunate they gave you that advice. So
it was pretty clear. And then, you know, people were doing things by hand. So, you know, I couldn't fake it with making a computer do it.
You told me once that you started early as a kid, like just cutting things out of magazines and putting photos together. Was that something that was just like what every kid does? Or is that something that...
I thought so. I mean, I would see people and I would get so excited about them or inspired about what was possible, like gymnasts, ice skaters, singers. As I got a bit older, tennis players, and I was constantly looking at photos, pictures, and then some I just had to put up on the wall. But I thought that was pretty usual too.
So perhaps we start the slideshow, not 100% chronological, but pretty chronological. Mm-hmm. This was a show that Calvin Tompkins said only 50 people saw, but it catapulted your career. That was room 828 at the Chelsea Hotel in '93. Do you want to talk a bit about this really important show and how it came about?
I would love to, thank you. It came about because Gavin Brown, who I wanted to work with, he had noticed that I made all these drawings. I guess I showed them to him. And he didn't have a gallery at the time. And Rickert very nicely encouraged us to get this room at the Chelsea Hotel. And we thought, that's great. It's a room, it's got a lock, and we can just put the stuff up there and it's open. We also loved the history of the hotel, the different people who had lived there. It seemed like a good backdrop for a show. So that's how it happened.
I remember at the time, Rickert had a show at 303 early on in the early 90s, and Gavin Brown was actually manning the front desk at 303. So I remember a moment where you would come into 303 gallery and there was Gavin sitting there, and coming another time and Rickert had put the inside out of the gallery and everything that's normally hidden was in the middle. Mm-hmm. And you and Rickert, as artists, was this inspiring? Were you inspiring each other, or was this just like what regular life is?
I was very inspired by Rickert's work. I like how unfiltered it was. I felt like that was so important in that time, to be direct with humans getting together and being able to receive art without much filtering, without anybody telling you what it was, or a lot of framing around it. And so that was very inspiring to me. I don't know what he would say.
I think you are very, very generous with mentioning other artists, and we go through the slideshow that even you portrait some artists that you feel were an inspiration. But let's go chronological. So this is, you were in your early 20s here when you did the Luxembourg Gardens, and perhaps...
Yeah, this is a copy of a Sargent painting, the last one. And this is a copy of a painting also. That was one way I was learning, was copying paintings. But the aim wasn't to make it look exactly like the thing. But this is of Ludwig II of Bavaria. And I
Yeah.
used to paint on glass that I would find on the street.
So you made paintings of paintings in the beginning?
I still do it all the time, actually.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's a great way to learn. And then it's also a great way to have the painting because I couldn't possibly get it myself.
In the 90s, having a show at the Chelsea Hotel where you have Ludwig II of Bavaria and Napoleon, it seemed very unlikely beginning of a career. You were looking back at these. What inspired you looking at Marie Antoinette and Napoleon and Ludwig II?
I was reading a lot about these people, and I mean, I'm not a historian, I'm not a scientist either, so I know there's a lot of parts of the story, but I was very inspired by the idea of what one person could do. And I also thought these people were very much their time. You know, I started to understand that portraiture was powerful because you could see these people's times in their faces. And I think that's why I was starting with that.
Mm-hmm. We go to the next couple of slides. We have these, I wrongly call them black and white because of course they're not black and white. We go to the next one. Princess Elizabeth's first radio address.
Yeah, it is her first radio address. I'm also very fascinated by these kind of moments where somebody has to, you know, she wasn't meant to be the queen. She was the niece of the person who was going to be king. And she had to rise to the occasion, and she really did. And I was very moved that recently she gave 2 speeches during this pandemic to the people in Britain. And she referred back to that time of making this speech, and it was so moving, the breadth of her life, and that she hadn't made many of these speeches, but in this time, it was so meaningful that she spoke to the people. Anyway.
Yeah, we saw some of the works that were on glass in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Elizabeth, which is like a drawing. Is this the first one that here we now see, which is perhaps the body of work you're most recognizable? This is from 1994.
Is it the first? Yeah.
No, just in the slideshow, not like in your career, but this is the first now we are looking at.
I would say this and the charcoal drawing of Napoleon.
Yeah. That's
really where I begin things in a way.
Mm-hmm. Say a bit about this. Let's go back to Dallas. Say a little bit about this. If you said Napoleon, these are like starting points.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a little bit on this painting?
I think I was just feeling like something was missing. I was feeling like I wasn't seeing a lot about heroism or kind of nobility that didn't have anything to do with aristocracy. I was more thinking about what it takes to make something, you know, when you could just stay at your mother's kitchen table and be drunk, or you could write a song, you know, and get out there and really fulfill yourself. I was very fascinated by that. And so that's where this kind of work came from. And then the way it's painted, I wanted to do it with a lot of economy, you know, not much paint, make a little bit go a long way. That was always part of my feeling.
We go to the next, and then perhaps even one more. I remember in the beginning of your career, people thought that you would paint mostly celebrities. And I remember that at some point you said it's actually perhaps you are more painting either artists because they create something and then they become famous because they write a song or they write a book or they sing. And if we go to the next painting, you also, of course, include your very immediate circle of friends in this. Do you want to say a bit about this painting?
I think that when I started painting Piat, Uklansky, who's an artist, I realized that these people were around me before I was much more with my head in books, and I didn't see. I would actually take friends I knew and I would cast them into novels like Proust and paint them as the characters in the novels, but not as themselves. And this was the first time I was really painting someone I knew as himself. And I was getting excited that, you know, I felt like I could see these things around me, this kind of creativity. And I really am very interested in creativity, what people do with themselves. I think that the conversation around celebrity is quite a mirror of the culture, because it's never really been my thinking in a way.
No, that makes sense. So let's go perhaps to the next, and then even the next one we have here. Democrats are more beautiful after Jonathan Horowitz. You said like celebrity is a mirror of the culture. It's more about people who create something. And Jonathan is a recurrent motif for your work. There are a couple of portraits you made, and he's also a dear friend of yours. Do you want to say somewhat, do you want to elaborate on this painting?
I think it's a very hard thing to make direct political work. I think we can all say we're political and it filters into our work, but to do something directly, you know, the way Jonathan uses videos of animals in industrial farms and things like that are very uncomfortable to look at, and he makes people look at them, but sometimes he dresses them in a kind of pop language, and I really admire that. And he also takes his opportunities to put his political ideas forward, and he had taken a photo of Al Gore from his Harvard yearbook, and he used it as an invitation for a show. Instead of like putting a piece of art that he made, he put this and it just said "Vote Gore," and it was so beautiful. And I had this thought that maybe people who were more humane look better, you know, from the inside, but also the outside too. And that's how it got its title.
At some point in an interview, you once said grace is still more beautiful than just beauty.
I think somebody said that about me.
Was in an interview with Believer magazine, and it was in a conversation. How do you relate to that comment? Is that something that you try to capture humanity, or what do you try to capture? Is it the beauty?
Well, I'm just stuck on this line about grace because that's such a beautiful word, but I think a friend of mine actually used that, not me. But do you want to ask what I think about beauty? Or?
Beauty and grace, because here it says Democrats are more beautiful. And of course your work is incredibly beautiful, because I think when you look at your work, it's somehow that you see an image you recognize from somewhere else, but somehow it is more present and it has a different dimension to it. Perhaps if we go to, let's go for the next and even the next one. I think you often have this is another painting of Nick here. You often use profile, and somehow perhaps we should start. How do you actually start a painting like this? Is this a painting after life, or after a photograph, or after?
It was from a photograph. And sometimes paintings start from life. Often these days they were, but actually now because of distancing, I'm wondering what's going to happen. How I'm going to do that, but I don't want to think about it too much yet. But Nick, I had been painting a lot at this time, so it also came from a lot of looking, and that really comes into the painting at the end when I know somebody well. You know, I can lose the photograph.
Perhaps we go to the and one more, because that's such a beautiful work. You You exhibited also your photographs, Elizabeth, when you got the Aldrich Prize, and you had an exhibition of photographs, of your photographs, that I think was approximately around the time when you had your new museum exhibition. And yeah. Do you consider your photographs works of art, or are they on the way to a work of art? Are they more like, or are they like drawings, preparing something?
It depends. Often my own like bad photography, you could call it bad because it's out of focus and all that, I used to make work from. I think it's a creative expression, you know, it's a point of view of my eyes, but I think they work very well for me in books, in the website I just made. I haven't found a way to show them that I love, unless it was blown up really big, maybe. And sometimes there's photographs I just like on their own, and they're kind of complete, so I don't make a picture from them. Mm-hmm. Too.
Perhaps we go through the next couple of slides. And perhaps we should just spend always a moment to look at them. We go at them at a certain pace. Here we have Jonathan again.
Mm-hmm. That painting always reminds me a little bit of Christina's World. Do you know the painting by Andrew Wyeth?
Yeah, it's one of the treasures of MoMA. When it's not on view, everybody always complains it's not there.
Maybe it has similar colors in it or something about it.
The present and the absent-minded at the same time. Here we have flowers and Diaghilev. Mm-hmm. Go to the next. When we said, let's stay a little bit on this one, because you mentioned that you paint people that inspire you and people that you have around you at sometimes, I think, when you have like elective affinities, like a chosen family, like a group of artists you're around the artists in the galleries you work with. Kai Althoff, this is such an incredible portrait here.
Oh, thank you.
So let's go a bit further. And then something like Twilight, which seems like not exactly your immediate circle of friends. Say a little bit about this, please.
But this kind of picture is my essence in a way. This moment, you know, that could be so life-changing with all these kissing pictures. I think I'm attracted to the idea of you know, how essential kissing can be, and the intensity of the characters. They gave me an opportunity to paint about this kind of intensity. Mm-hmm. These two, this is a copy from Delacroix.
Yeah.
The Ladies of Algiers.
When you often talk about works of literature or opera or paintings that inspire you. If we go to the next one, and then we have like another artist in your community. If we go to the next one, the still life. Mm-hmm. And let's stay a little bit with this painting, Isa Gensken. And mm-hmm. That's from 1998, where I guess you didn't know her because you were still before art school and everything. You were very young, you were a teenager.
I think this might be from 81 actually. Mm-hmm. The painting you mean?
Yeah.
I did it in the 2000s, but the picture it's from is from the 80s. Of her. I had met her a few times when I did this, but this is of her when she was younger.
Yeah. Who are the artists that do inspire you? Who are the artists that you feel as an artist are important for you?
Oh, there's so many. So many of my friends and people from history. Isa Genskin, very inspired by. So many. Manet, Clara, Jonathan Horowitz, Wolfgang Tillmans. I maybe because I'm on the spot, I'm gonna not say all of them. I feel a real affinity with painters from back in time. I feel an affinity with Egyptian artists. You know that there's such a long lineage of portraiture. But then I also feel a strong affinity with artists in general and writers too, like Flaubert or.
If we go to the next slide.
Or Giorgione.
It's incredible because I remember when, let's stay a little bit on this painting here. When you started in the 1990s with the show at the Chelsea Hotel, figurative painting was not exactly of the moment in a way. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was an important show Laura Hopman put together with Luc Tuymans and John Curran and you. And I think that was a turning point for many to look at all three artists differently, you differently, John Curran differently, Luc Tuymans differently. But I remember when you and I were still in Berlin in the mid-90s and we did the Berlin Biennial, there was no painting in the Berlin Biennial. Mm-hmm. There was like, painting was really not what we felt was going forward. There was a backlash after the 80s in a certain way, and you kept this going. When you like, no, I always admire when you in the 90s were presenting these works, but then when you have a painting like this after Giorgione, say a bit why you painted this and how this came into existence, Elizabeth.
This painting, the original painting by Giorgione, is in Berlin, and I would visit it a lot. And I felt like the fellow in the painting was so present, so alive, and had that magic of a piece of art that there was no time in it. And I wanted to know more about the painting, how it was made, and a way to do that was for me to try to paint it myself. And I made a different cropping of it. And of course, Giorgione painted in all the hair and things like that. But he was so present for me. He felt like somebody I wanted to know.
Yeah, it's incredible work. It's really incredible. So let's go to the next. And we stay a little bit. May I say that Jonas Kaufmann seems like a recurrent fascination for you. I'm trying to word this very carefully. How was it when you first met him?
Oh, it was so strange because I had been painting him and I had seen him in opera a few times, but I had been listening to his music so much and making some pictures. So then when I first met him, I didn't faint because I was so excited or whatever. It was just so odd to see him in the third dimension. My brain couldn't handle it in a way. And also when I met him, I can't remember what opera it was, but he had just died in the last act and he had blood all over him. And then he was so alive. It was extra exciting to have gone through his death and then so wonderful that he was alive.
Let's go to the next couple of slides. So here we have a self-portrait. Let's stay a bit on this. Mm-hmm. Self-portrait is a very different kind of portraiture. If you think about kind of churches, church leaders and aristocrats commissioned paintings to be made throughout history, but mm-hmm. Self-portrait is a different, because normally it's not commissioned, it's a different kind of, who is that made by, of course, by the artist, but it's not commissioned by anybody who wants a painting later. So there is a different tradition in self-portraiture. Say about how, because we will have a couple of more portraits of you, of yourself. Mm-hmm. Say a bit about this, what it means for you to do self-portraits, Elizabeth?
Well, first though, I would say that for me, I'm not held in any standards of portraiture because I don't do commissions. So it's not like Gainsborough, who had to make, who accepted it for money, and it's a different thing. So I have freedom in everything I do. So in that, doing a self-portrait isn't that different. And actually it works out much better if I can treat myself in that way, like it's not me. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, it's good if I have a little bit of distance about it. Somehow.
Let's go through the next slides. We have here Clara again here with irises. The next slide perhaps Elias, and the next Tim. Here again the profile. Let's go for the next. Here we have Jonas Kaufmann again. What does opera mean for you? Let's go back quickly what does opera mean for you? Is it just something that you enjoy very much, or is it an inspiration?
I really love opera. I think it really helps me out sometimes. I've been noticing during the pandemic, I'm so grateful. I'm in a good place. I'm healthy, and I'm totally grateful. Most people I know are doing fine. But still, knowing these things are going on, it's very hard on your heart, and when I listen to opera, sometimes I find a way that I can safely feel what I'm feeling. It's a safe place to feel some very, very strong emotions. Could be joyous, but often it's, the ones you kind of don't want to be alone with. And it's a good container for it somehow, to let it get out of you. And you can share that experience with the people around you, or you feel less alone because somebody made this music and it matches the feeling that you didn't even know you had inside. And that's something that I think a lot about in art, how to contain those kinds of human feelings.
Yeah. I listened to a lot of opera in my Sturm und Drang early years when I was very emotional about things. I recently listened to a lot of opera again because I had a lot of downtime that you normally spend driving somewhere or visiting friends. And I can completely relate to what you're saying, because it allows for a certain level of emotion because it's so dramatic, or it's so beautiful or so bombastic, that it allows you to just dissolve in this, nearly to be in this. When we look at this from a painterly point, what is that actually? Is how do you make a work like this? Because this seems like a bit of a point of departure in a way, stylistically. How do you?
Well, this is a monotype, and it's quite large. It's on paper. It's a different way of working in that it's not something you can take a lot of time with. The paint can't dry before it's printed. So I often get to use a lot of big marks that in a painting I could not live with. I would feel were too garish or something. But in this sense, I like moving around the picture very quickly. And with a monotype, I'm not going to go into how they're made, but you build up a surface on them from previous printing. So it's almost like you have a second artist with you.
You're painting an artist, so you have
who's working with you, and that gives it a different feel also, because
How do you,
for me,
sorry.
I would just add one other thing. I mean, for me, the way the marks move around the picture, for me, is quite like music, in that it's, without being able to put it into words or anything, it can make you feel a certain way, or make you move around the picture in a certain way that gives you a kind of feeling or an urgency about some things.
How do you decide if a certain motif becomes a painting or a drawing or monotype? What makes you decide that this will become a work on paper or a painting?
Sometimes I can feel that something, I would like to make something a print because it's something I would like to make a lot of. So that's a way to really get a picture out in the world in a big way, because a lot of people could get it, or it could be in a lot of places. Or I feel like it's a very important thing. Also working with prints, I feel like there's less pressure on prints. People don't look at that world as much. And so it's kind of like painting was in the 90s. While no one is looking, you could be very free. So I often try things first in the print studio, things I haven't worked with before. And so that happens a lot. And then for when I'm in my studio, I just try what works. Sometimes something will feel like it needs a real fine line, and that will become a drawing. But if it doesn't work out, I'll try it as a painting. I'll try everything till it works.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at the next couple of slides. We have Dan Kier-Nielsen here, the next perhaps. And the next. He leaves it here. We have another historical Louis XIV.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the next. I would like to rest our eyes a little bit on this one, because I have to say, Elizabeth, I knew this painting, I'd seen it, and I was completely wrong of what it showed. And I thought it was a painting of Leonardo DiCaprio.
That's funny. I didn't mean to.
Oh, it's kind of, because like preparing the lecture, of course, you work through all the captions, and this is such. Talk a bit about this as a self-portrait.
It was it's a self-portrait. I would also say the painting that was before of Louis XIV was, in a way, when I was painting it, because I was painting it after a tapestry, so there wasn't a lot of detail in it. And so it felt very free for me to put kind of whatever expression I wanted into the painting.
Shall we quickly go back to the Louis XIV?
I really felt like this was a self-portrait in a way, like the emotion in his face.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And then we go to the self.
Okay, this is a self-portrait. It's me. It's actually, I was in the opera house. I was very excited because I was watching rehearsals of Tristan and Isolde, but I had been going through, it's just a personal thing which I won't talk about, but I was very anxious about something. And I realized after, I didn't think about it, but I realized how the anxiety was in the eyes of like looking so openly. So that's how this painting came about.
When there is a painting like this with this very intense, I think, image, is this based on a photograph, or is this based on several photographs, or is this based?
That's a really good question, because it is based on a few photos. And then the background, I kind of took the interior of the opera house, which is all those colors, and used it as the background, which wasn't where I was when I took the photo.
Yeah, what an incredible painting.
Oh, thank you.
Here we have a painting after Courbet.
Courbet.
And I remember in the 90s, let's have a moment to rest our eyes on this one and then go to the next. Both are called David. Here, this is from 2017. I remember when I first looked at your work, I felt most of the people you portrayed were heroes in a way, historical heroes or creative heroes or crazy heroes like Ludwig II, because he was a mad king. And then, of course, the fascination with beauty. There is later, we will see at your National Portrait Gallery, a shot of this incredibly beautiful portrait of Kurt Cobain that you were using in the National Portrait Gallery. Say a bit about these you capture something in these that feels like, for me at least, I haven't seen that before. Even if a painting is based on a painting or a painting is based on a photo, when I see your work, I feel I look at something I haven't seen before in its essence and in its presence. Can you say a little bit about?
That's a nice question. Well, you know, for me, it is a transformative thing. I'm not wanting to make a copy of the picture, that it, you know, the source. I want to make it magic. You know, I want the magic to happen. It's almost like I can't even make it happen, but I want it to happen. And the first painting of David Bowie, that was from right after he died. And I've loved David Bowie since I was 12. It was one of the first things that made me feel very free, and like there would be space for me in the world. Somehow, I don't know how I got that. And
I can relate to that.
I felt less alone listening to his music. But I had always been trying to make these pictures of David Bowie, and only managed one that I showed in LA in around 2010. And it was when I got into opera that I started to get his face a little bit more as a mask. Mm-hmm. In a way, that last picture, it's a combination of also another person that I know got into that painting very much.
Oh no, let's stay with
this one. Exactly. It looks quite a lot like a friend of mine also. But I took this off of a screen in a gym on a treadmill, and there was a reflection in the photo. And I thought, that looks like Jupiter. It's magical. I want to have that in the painting. And that's how that got in there. But, and the next painting also, it was a particular time where I hadn't made art for a little bit. And it was because I couldn't. And then this was the first thing that came out. And it meant so much to me that first I could still make something. I could make something, and I didn't even know how it happened.
Yeah, it's incredible. These work. No, it feels incredible. When you first talked about the works before the Chelsea Hotel, when you were painting on glass, there's a translucency that, of course, when you paint on glass, you might not even see everywhere where you painted, because the color is a bit like translucent, like watercolor. This one also feels very translucent because you left those areas white in a way.
Often I leave a lot of the ground of the paper or the painting. I like a lot of air. Like if I was a musician, you would call it space between the notes. I like to leave room for people to get in it.
Let's look at the next couple of slides. We have here Elio and Oliver. Let's rest a bit on this. Call Me by Your Name. I could perhaps not relate 100% to Twilight, but I can relate 50% to this life-changing movie.
You, Klaus.
Yes, thank you. Say a bit what inspired you to do this.
I think you can relate. I was so inspired by the movie, by their ability to really show love and feeling. And I thought a lot about how vulnerable the actors must have been to each other to make that feel the way it did. So there was the characters experiencing this, but there were also the two humans there also really experiencing it to make it happen in that moment. And I wanted to know more about that somehow.
Yeah. For me, I admire artists because I think by just being an artist and making a work, you make yourself so vulnerable in a way. Is that something you struggle with, or is that something you can objectify and that is a work then, and then you feel a little bit less vulnerable?
It's something I luckily totally forget about until moments like right now. When I'm talking about my work, I forget about it, and then I'll suddenly be at the opening and be like, oh yeah, this is, the person I love the most in the world, and these things of course mean so much to me. And then it's confusing to suddenly be around the pictures with other people, and then I remember, oh right, yeah, that's what I do.
For me, when I look at art, I often fall back to pre-art school or first year of art school, when our professor used to say, for me that was Katharina Sieverding in Berlin, she always used to say, look for truth and look for beauty. And sometimes I just use this as a little exercise, and I think you definitely captured both here. So.
Oh, thank you. I have a friend who also says, look for embarrassment. That's always a good sign when you're very embarrassed about something.
I think that's our friend Matthew. Yeah.
You're right.
Yes, of course. So let's go to the next slide. Clara again, and
It's an etching.
It's an etching. So we had the monoprint, we have the etching, and let's go to the next. And the next is gonna be, this is a really, really beautiful
Thank you.
painting, because this is your curator of the National Portrait Gallery, who I think we will send this recording of the.
I think he's here with us.
Wonderful. So that's Nick Callahan, the director of the National Portrait Gallery, reading, what is he reading, a Raphael or some?
Yeah, it was a big Taschen book about Raphael.
In short pants.
Yes. It was a huge surprise, these short pants. I thought when you showed up, I thought, oh, casual. And I just thought I would, of course, be making a picture from here up, but just to make it long story short, we went for a walk and we really talked. And when we got back, I sat him down in the chair I thought I was going to paint him in. And then I said, you know what? I think you should come in here and sit on the sofa. And the shorts had to be a part of it because it was a part of getting to know Nick.
Mm-hmm. It's an incredible painting. Let's go for the next. And the next. Greta Thunberg, what an inspiration. Mm. Have you ever met her, Elizabeth?
No, no. And I don't feel like that's personally important. I would love to, but I think she's busy. She's got a lot to do.
Say a bit about what she means to you.
Oh, she makes me very hopeful. I know I'm not alone in this. I think that she's so rational and she's a definite, clear-eyed voice of truth of what's going on. She's also captivating. A lot of people have been saying what she's saying for a long time, but somehow the way she can communicate and the way she really doesn't care what anybody thinks, she's very powerful. So I find that very hopeful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And she's such a good antidote in this time to the more negative people we're seeing around talking. I mean, she's almost like, okay, if we're going to have that hot air over here, somebody sent us this angel to do away with that. Somehow.
Angel. It's also, you painted her in a very angelic way. I'm so mesmerized by the area in the face where you have her eyes are very like focused, they're very in focus, and then the hair is like a corona around her in a way with a beautiful color.
She wears purple trousers quite a lot.
Yeah. How
that ended up being her hair color.
Yeah. How did you decide how big is that painting?
I don't know. I think it's like 14 by 17 inches.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the little bit bigger side for me.
Yeah. Sounds like
this is from one of the first photos of her just sitting outside the Parliament in the rain. Maybe it was like the first month she was protesting.
Incredible work. Let's go for the next slide. This is different.
This is a lino cut of Christian, my boyfriend, and it's very big actually.
How big is very big for you? Because I felt the Thunberg was already monumental. If it's 17 inches, that's like a big work.
This is about, I don't know, maybe 3 feet high.
That is monumental.
It is.
And is this a direction, the linoleum cut, if we go back, is this something you are working on right now more often?
It's something, when I'm in Denmark, there's a place I go to that I can do that. It's one of the kinds of printmaking that is available to me there. So I like doing it. I love putting everything down to one line, you know, be it a thin line or a thick line, it's all a line. And I love being limited like that. And so I'm always kind of looking for those opportunities.
It's incredible. Let's go for the next slide. Here we have again a Jonas Kaufmann.
This is very new.
Don't have a crush on him.
It's different than a crush. Yeah. It's more like love.
Yes, exactly. Let's go to the next. There's love.
Yeah, just love.
What a beautiful painting.
Thank you.
Let's go to the next. That's Lara.
It's Lara.
And I want to show one last slide before we do an experiment and try to see if we can.
Oh.
Recently you have worked in the Villa Medici with one of your inspirations. You have, I think, Camille Claudel is an important figure for you, and you have worked in the Villa Medici, and you have worked in this incredible show. It's a National Portrait Gallery, which for me, when I first looked at your work in the early 90s, I felt you were so unafraid to have a reference to paintings from earlier times, and I felt that you were not looking for a new, like compulsively looking for a new form or a new medium or a new conceptual approach, but you were unafraid to revisit certain ideas of portraiture and certain ideas of depicting a person. And then here with Nicholas, you did this incredible show at the National Portrait Gallery, where it wasn't an exhibition where there was a room of portraits by Elizabeth Peyton, but what you did is you interdispersed, you could actually go through the museum and put your works in dialogue with other pieces. Here you put Kurt in dialogue with Queen Elizabeth, right? So how did that feel?
It felt very good. It felt like a dream come true. And I did purposely start with a picture of the Chelsea Hotel and then finish with this great opportunity I had at the National Portrait Gallery in London. Because in a way, I felt there was a similar thing going on about the work being out in the world. You know, outside of an art context. Because in a way, the Portrait Gallery has more of a history feeling about it. So it was just a dream. You know, I felt like I'd been walking towards this point my whole life without even knowing about it. And I did have a few rooms to myself also downstairs, but throughout the gallery I got to put my work next to things, and it was a real opportunity to see actually how the work wasn't portraiture in many ways. Also, I think to what you said, I don't think I ever had to look for being new, because I always felt like I'm alive now, so that newness is just there. I think if I paint a Cézanne or something after Camille Claudel, my time's going to get in there, so I don't have to really force it on anybody. But anyway, I love this picture in particular because I love the similarity between these two figures, that they, for their own self-identity, they came to the same conclusions of how to present themselves. Mm-hmm. Pale skin, the red hair, the kind of artificialness about them.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's so strong. National Portrait Gallery, portrait also, photography comes to one's mind. Do you also have photographers that inspired you? Because we mentioned mostly kind of figures from literature, from opera, from painting. Is photography something that you just do nearly like a preparation for something? I asked you that before in a different version. Or are there photographers that you really...
There's definitely photographers I love. Wolfgang comes to mind immediately, and older photographers. But when it comes to being inspired or for my own work, those are so complete in themselves. I usually don't feel like I can add to them. I think I'm usually really looking at the people in the photographs also. But yeah, I love photography.
I'm asking this question, it's leading. I'm asking this question leading to hopefully a world premiere or an experiment here. So let's see if we can do a preview of your incredible new website. So you said you did a lot of drawings, you worked on a lot of works during the safer at home, the lockdown, but you also worked on something that's perhaps a little too fast. So
well, that's the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I realized all my shows were being canceled. Maybe I'll talk about it after we look at it.
Fingers crossed, knock on wood, it's slowly, continuously moving. Wow. It's incredible, Elizabeth.
Oh, thank you.
How long did you work on it?
I was working on the layout of it for a few months. And then I worked with the designer, Jules Estevez in London, to develop the website. And then we laid it out and then gave it to a developer, and it was made in about 3 weeks, the actual website.
Yeah. Do you consider the website just a website, or it's also an articulation of your work?
Well, it's like I wanted it to be an art experience with no filter. So it's a website. That's an artwork.
It's really incredible.
Because I wanted to have an art experience, and if I wanted to get my work out there, and I knew I wouldn't be able to do it. It just seemed like a natural way, a direction to try.
It's really also beautiful how it captures your process of image making and of juxtaposing and of creating a dialogue of certain images.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I feel like this is the kind of thing I could never do in a gallery, to, you know, to put the pictures so close to each other and on top of each other, things like that. I can really emphasize what I'm looking at.
In 2008 or 2009, you collaborated with Matthew Barney on the island of Hydra.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at all the, because I didn't know before you did that you had this fascination with Egypt.
I didn't really have that then, actually. It was, I had read Flaubert in Egypt many times, his diaries, and then I had these books about Egypt. And after I saw Philip Glass's Akhenaten at the Met, I got the books out again. And the story of Tutankhamun just gripped me. And I was feeling like I wanted to make him alive, like make pictures of him not as a sculpture, but as a human, living person. I don't know. And then when the pandemic was starting, it all started to feel more like what I needed to see, what I was thinking about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us this preview. It's really, really incredible.
Oh, thank you for doing it. It's a pleasure.
Are these works, are some of the works, did you make some of the works to complete it, or were these all existing works, Elizabeth?
Well, I always had in mind when I was making these works that at first I thought they were going to be in a show with a catalog that would have the photos. And then that was becoming clear that that couldn't happen. So they were always kind of growing together. And then when I realized it was becoming a website, then other things were possible with the photographs. Yeah, but they're all made pretty much in mind of to be in this. Two of the paintings I had started a while ago, but they only got cooking now.
Yeah, I was so much looking forward to your big show in China. I think you were doing a show at UCCA. That's coming. That's wonderful. I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, thanks. It's going to be in August now. Oh,
great. That's great. Elizabeth, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is like such an incredibly generous you open your doors and your mind and your...
Thank you. I'm honored, really, and honored for the company as well.
Letting us into your thought process and the making to your studio. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. It's been great being here.